When I first met Darren Wells, it was like something out of a dream. I was at a charity gala, surrounded by glittering gowns and tuxedos, but my attention was drawn to him immediately. His entrance was quiet, yet he commanded the room. Tall, dark hair, a perfectly tailored suit, and those piercing blue eyes that seemed to look right through me. I had never seen someone so effortlessly charming. He made his way toward me, his smile genuine and inviting. "May I have this dance?" he asked, his voice smooth as velvet. I stood there, taken aback by his sudden approach. I wasn't used to men like him, not that I was some kind of wallflower, but he was different. He wasn't the type of guy I usually dated. There was something magnetic about him. I think I'd like that," I replied, feeling my heart skip a beat. The next hour passed in a blur. We danced, we talked, we laughed. Darren was unlike any man I had ever met. He asked about my life, my dreams, my passions, like he genuinely cared about my thoughts. It wasn't the typical small talk I was used to at these events. I found myself opening up to him in a way I hadn't with anyone before. When the evening ended, Darren walked me to my car. The cool night air didn't seem so cold when he was by my side. I had to admit, I was already falling for him. Over the next few weeks, Darren and I spent more time together. He took me out to fancy restaurants, rented a private yacht for a sunset cruise, and surprised me with spontaneous getaways. Everything he did felt like it was straight out of a movie. He didn't just shower me with gifts, he showered me with attention. He listened when I talked, remembered the small details about me that most people forgot. I had never felt so cherished. I started to believe that I had finally found my happy ending. Darren was everything I wanted: handsome, kind, generous, and most of all, he seemed to love me for who I was. For the first time in my life, I truly believed in fairy tales. Then, one evening, Darren did something that changed everything. It wasn't grand or dramatic, but the impact it had on me was undeniable. We were having dinner at my favorite restaurant when he suddenly looked at me, his expression serious. "Sophie, I need to ask you something important." My heart skipped. Was he going to propose? Was this the moment I had been waiting for? "What is it?" I asked, trying to steady my nerves. He reached across the table, taking my hand. "I've been thinking a lot about us, about the future, and I want you to know I'm in this for the long haul. I want to build something with you, not just a relationship, but a life." I felt my pulse race. This was it. This was the moment where everything I had ever wanted was coming together. "I'm in this too," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. Darren's smile deepened. "I know you are, and that's why I think we should take the next step together." I could barely contain my excitement. I had imagined this moment 1,000 times, but nothing prepared me for the next few words. "I think we should move in together, get married, start our life together." The words hung in the air. Marriage, we had only been dating for 6 months. Sure, everything had been moving fast, but the way he said it, the certainty in his voice, it felt right. But there was something else behind his words, something I couldn't quite place. Maybe it was just the whirlwind of emotions, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. I nodded. Yes, I want that too." Darren smiled, and for a moment I felt like I was floating on air. This was it, the moment where everything came together. I had finally found the love I had always dreamed of, or so I thought. 3 weeks after our dinner conversation, Darren whisked me away to a cabin in the mountains. He told me it was a surprise, a romantic getaway to celebrate our time together. When we arrived, the snow was gently falling around the secluded log cabin, and the world seemed to pause. It felt like something straight out of a movie, a world of our own, just him and me. Inside, the cabin was everything I could have imagined, the fire crackling in the hearth, candles flickering on the table, and the faint scent of pine trees in the air. The snow outside framed the scene perfectly, like a pristine, untouched world we were sharing. But beneath the beauty, a tension I couldn't shake lingered. I was too in love with him to admit it at first, but the nagging thought was there. Why was everything so perfect? Was it all real? Darren had always been charming, generous with his time and attention, but lately there had been moments, fleeting glances, quiet pauses, where I felt like he was slipping away from me. He'd become more distant, buried in his phone, his work, his empire. But tonight, everything seemed different. He seemed more focused, more present. His smile was genuine, and for a brief moment I allowed myself to believe that this was how it would always be. "Sophie," Darren said, his voice soft but serious, "there's something I need to tell you." I looked at him, heart racing in anticipation. Could it be? Could this be the moment? My breath caught in my throat. Is this it? The propose? "I've been thinking about us a lot lately," he continued, his gaze unwavering. "What we have together. I don't want it to end. I think we're both ready for the next step." I couldn't stop the flutter of excitement in my chest. This was it. This was the moment every woman dreams of, the proposal, the commitment, the promise of forever. "I know it's fast," he said, standing up from his chair and walking toward me, his movements deliberate and slow. "But Sophie, I know you're the one. I want to build something with you, not just a relationship but a life, and I can't imagine my future without you." His words, warm and sincere, wrapped around me like a comforting blanket. He loved me. He really did. This was the man I had fallen for, the one who saw me, who cared about me, who made me feel like I was his whole world. "I want to spend the rest of my life with you, Sophie," Darren said, reaching into his jacket pocket. My heart pounded in my chest, and I suddenly realized I hadn't been breathing. He took out a small velvet box and opened it, revealing a sparkling diamond ring. Tears welled up in my eyes, my throat tight with emotion. This was everything I had ever wanted. A fairy tale proposal, a man who seemed to be everything I needed. "Yes, Darren," I whispered, barely able to keep my voice steady. "Yes, I will marry you." Darren's smile lit up the room, and for a moment I was lost in the glow of his affection. He slid the ring onto my finger, his touch gentle and careful. It felt like the beginning of something beautiful. We embraced, our lips meeting in a kiss that tasted of promises and new beginnings. But even in that perfect moment, that fleeting shadow of doubt remained in the back of my mind. I had never been one to question things like this, especially not when everything seemed to be falling into place. But there was something I couldn't ignore, something about the way Darren was looking at me that night. It was as if his gaze lingered just a little too long on the ring, as if he was already imagining what it would bring him. The thought was fleeting, but it lingered. We spent the rest of the night in each other's arms, but my mind wandered, and I couldn't shake the feeling that Darren wasn't just marrying me because of love. The ring was beautiful, the cabin was perfect, and the night was flawless. Yet, deep down, I wondered if I was just another notch in his belt of successful conquests. The next morning, I woke up to find Darren already at the kitchen table, his laptop open in front of him. He didn't seem to notice me at first, but when he finally looked up, his smile was warm, though it seemed a little too practiced. "Good morning, beautiful," he said, his voice soft but distracted. "Good morning," I replied, but there was something off about the way he said it. Beautiful. It wasn't the word I wanted to hear, it was the distance in his tone that threw me off. He didn't seem as present anymore. The sparkle of last night's proposal had dimmed. I pushed the thought aside, telling myself I was just overthinking things. We spent the day hiking through the snow-covered woods. The cold air felt fresh, but my thoughts were clouded with doubt. Darren was more interested in his phone than in me, more focused on his business calls than our time together. I started to feel a sinking feeling in my chest, the same feeling I had before, when things had started to change between us. That night, as we sat in front of the fire, sipping wine, the silence between us grew heavier. My mind kept returning to that nagging feeling, the feeling that I wasn't just the woman he loved. I was the woman he needed to control. Darren had always been careful with his words, but now I began to hear something different in the way he spoke, something calculating, deliberate. He would talk about our future, but the hour seemed less about us and more about his plans. Every time he mentioned our life together, it seemed as though he was already envisioning how it would look with him at the top and me beside him, supporting him. Supporting him, that was the key. He didn't need me for love. He needed me for the empire he was building. That's when I realized the truth. He wasn't in love with me. He was in love with what I could offer him, my family's wealth, my connections, my status. I wasn't his equal partner, I was a tool for his success. The days that followed our engagement were filled with excitement and plans, but a growing unease began to fester inside me. The sparkle of the ring on my finger was still fresh, but the shine of my engagement was starting to dull. Darren, the man I had trusted with my heart, was becoming someone I didn't recognize. At first, I told myself I was just overthinking things. Of course he's busy, I reasoned. He's a billionaire. His life is complicated. He loves me, and that's all that matters. But love isn't just about grand gestures and expensive gifts. It's about consistency. It's about being present emotionally and physically. And Darren, well, he was nowhere to be found. It started with small things, the missed calls, the texts that came hours after I'd sent them, the constant, almost obsessive focus on his phone whenever we were together. At first, I told myself that it was just his work, that he was just caught up in the demands of his business empire. But when it started to affect our time together, I began to feel like I was no longer a priority. I began to notice that the conversations we had weren't really about us anymore. He'd talk about his new investments, his business partners, how much money he was making, how much more he wanted to make. I would mention my family, my career, things that used to excite him, and he would nod politely, but his attention would already be somewhere else, usually on his phone. It was as if I had become invisible. A week later, I received a phone call that would change everything. I had been at my mother's house, sitting with her in the kitchen, when the call came through. I didn't recognize the number, but something told me to pick up. "Hello," I answered, trying to mask the unease in my voice. "Sophie, it's Carla from the bank. We've been going over your accounts, and there are some irregular transactions that we need to discuss." My heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean, irregular transactions?" "There's a large sum of money that was transferred from your account to a business account registered under your fiancé's name. It's significant," she said, her voice cautious but professional. I felt the blood drain from my face. "Are you sure?" "Yes," she said, her tone no longer as friendly. "The transfer was made without your knowledge. It's all documented." I could feel the world slipping away as I stood in my mother's kitchen, the phone pressed to my ear. "How much?" I whispered. $500,000, Sophie. It was transferred last week." I hung up the phone, my hands shaking. My mother noticed the change in my face immediately. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" I couldn't speak. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of what I had just heard. $500,000, transferred without my knowledge to a business account, and it wasn't just any account, it was Darren's. My world, which had felt so stable just a week ago, was suddenly filled with questions. How could Darren have transferred such a large amount of money from my account without my permission? And why hadn't he told me about it? That evening, Darren returned home late, as usual. He didn't even apologize for missing dinner, didn't seem to notice the tension hanging in the air. As always, he was glued to his phone. "Darren," I said, my voice trembling slightly as I crossed the room to face him. "I need to ask you something." He barely looked up from the screen, but I noticed the slight tension in his jaw. "Sure, what's on your mind?" "Why was $500,000 transferred from my account into your business account?" At first, he froze, then quickly looked back at his phone, as if pretending he didn't hear me. "What? I don't know what you're talking about, Sophie," he said, his voice tight. "That wasn't me." I felt my heart sink. "Don't lie to me, Darren. The bank called me. I know what happened." His face changed then, cold, calculating. For the first time since I had known him, I saw a different side of him. A side that made my stomach churn with unease. "That money was nothing," he said, dismissing it with a wave of his hand. "Just some investment stuff. You don't need to worry about it." "I don't need to worry about it," I repeated. My voice rising with disbelief. "That's my money, Darren. I have the right to know where it's going." "Listen," he said, putting his phone down and standing up. "It's just business. You don't understand how these things work. Trust me, Sophie." Something about the way he said it sent a chill down my spine. It wasn't just the words, but the way he was looking at me now, as if I were a nuisance, as if I were the one causing the problem by questioning him. I stepped back, my chest tightening. "How long has this been going on?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "How many times have you used my money for your own benefit without telling me?" Darren's eyes narrowed, and for a brief moment I saw something dark flash across his face. "Don't make this about money, Sophie. This is our future." His words were meant to reassure me, but instead they filled me with more doubt. Our future. Was that what he wanted? Or was I just a pawn in his grand scheme to build his empire? I turned away, my heart racing. "I think I need some time to think, Darren." He didn't respond. He didn't need to. The look in his eyes told me everything I needed to know. The days that followed the bank call were filled with a silence so heavy it felt like the air around us had thickened. Darren had retreated into his world of business, leaving me to fester in the uncertainty and betrayal that now consumed my thoughts. I couldn't shake the image of that money, $500,000, slipping quietly into his account without my permission. It wasn't just the money. It was the fact that he had never told me about it, never offered an explanation. The man I had married, the one I thought was so kind, generous, and loving, was beginning to look like a stranger. And with each passing day, that stranger grew more dangerous. It had been 3 days since I confronted Darren about the money, and in those 3 days I had barely spoken to him. The tension between us was unbearable, but Darren acted as though nothing had changed. He would still kiss me goodnight, still hold me in his arms in the morning, but I no longer felt the warmth. Every touch now felt like a lie. That evening, I decided I could no longer live in this suffocating uncertainty. I needed answers, and I wasn't going to wait around for Darren to give them to me. I took matters into my own hands. I started with the files in his study, ones he had left open when he had been working late the previous night. They were filled with spreadsheets, projections, and business contracts. But amidst the charts and graphs, something caught my eye, an email chain with a familiar subject line. "Sophie's trust fund." I froze. I knew about my trust fund. Darren had known about it from the very beginning. It was part of my family's legacy, something I had always been told would be there for me when I needed it. But I never thought Darren would be involved in it. I clicked open the email, my hands trembling as I read the messages. The first one was from Darren, sent only a few days before our engagement. He was negotiating with a financial advisor about transferring part of my trust fund into an offshore account, one that I had never heard of. The second email was from the advisor, confirming the transfer and including a list of businesses Darren was involved with. I felt the room spin as I absorbed the weight of what I was reading. Darren had been planning to take control of my trust fund long before we got engaged. He had been plotting this from the very beginning. His entire persona, the charming, thoughtful, and loving man I had fallen for, had been an act. A carefully crafted act designed to get closer to the money he wanted. I stared at the screen for a long time, the full extent of his greed unfolding before me. I had trusted him. I had believed in him. And now I realized he had been using me the whole time. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. But as I closed the laptop, I knew what I had to do. I couldn't ignore this anymore. It wasn't just about money. It was about the fact that he had manipulated my trust, my love, for his own benefit. That night, as Darren sat across from me at dinner, his demeanor unchanged, I couldn't keep quiet any longer. I had to confront him, had to say the words that had been choking me for days. "Darren," I began, my voice low but firm, "I know everything." He didn't look up from his plate at first, but I saw his jaw tense. "I know about the trust fund," I continued, "and I know what you've been planning. How long were you going to keep this up, Darren? How long were you going to use me?" Finally, he set his fork down, his eyes meeting mine. There was no surprise in his gaze, no hint of remorse, only cold calculation. "It's not what you think," he said, his tone icy. "I was doing it for us, Sophie, for our future. You just don't understand the magnitude of what we're building here." "Building?" I spat, my anger rising. "You've been using me to build your empire, Darren. This isn't about us. This is about you and your greed. You've been playing me this whole time. I've been nothing more than a way for you to get what you want." "Don't be so dramatic," he said, his voice still calm. "You're overreacting." "Overreacting?" I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. "You've been stealing from me, Darren, from the very beginning." He stood up, walking toward the window as if trying to distance himself from the confrontation. "You don't get it, do you? We're talking about legacy here, Sophie. We're talking about power. We could have everything we've ever dreamed of if you just understand that." I stood up as well, moving closer to him. "What I understand is that you don't love me, Darren. You never did. You loved my money. You used me to get it, and now you want me to just sit back and watch as you take everything I've worked for. Well, that's not happening." He turned around sharply, his eyes narrowing. "You're making a huge mistake. You think I'm the villain here, but this is just business. This is how the world works." "No," I said, my voice shaking with fury. "This is how you work. You've been lying to me this entire time. Everything we've built, everything we had, is built on lies, and I won't stand for it." Darren's expression hardened. He took a step toward me, his face inches from mine. "You'll regret this, Sophie. No one betrays me and gets away with it. I'll make sure of that." My heart raced, but there was a strange sense of calm in me now. For the first time, I wasn't afraid. I was done being manipulated. "We'll see about that," I said, my voice steady, my eyes locking with his. "This is just the beginning, Darren. You've made your move, and now I'm going to make mine." The days after my confrontation with Darren felt like a blur. I had hoped, in some naive part of me, that after the truth came to light, he would apologize, maybe even try to make things right. But that didn't happen. Instead, Darren retreated further into his shell, becoming more distant, more cold. It was as if nothing I said mattered anymore, like I no longer existed in his world. I wasn't stupid. I could see the truth now. The charming, loving man who had swept me off my feet was a facade, a carefully constructed mask to get what he wanted. The man I loved was gone, replaced by someone who didn't care who he trampled on to get to the top. I spent the next few days in a haze of anger, confusion, and heartbreak. The more I thought about what had happened, the more I realized how deep Darren's betrayal ran. This wasn't just about money, it was about everything I had ever believed in. Darren had lied to me, used me, and manipulated me at every turn. And the worst part, he didn't even seem to care. But I wasn't going to let him win. I had to fight back. I had to expose him for who he really was. The first step was gathering evidence. I had always trusted Darren with everything, my money, my heart, my future. But now I had to turn my back on that trust and take action. I needed to find proof of the manipulation, the fraud, the deceit that had been hiding behind the man I thought I loved. I started with his phone. It wasn't something I was proud of, but at that moment I didn't care. I needed to know the truth. I waited until Darren had left for a business meeting, taking his phone with him. I knew I couldn't let him catch me snooping, but I was desperate. As I scrolled through his messages, my heart sank. It wasn't just about the trust fund. Darren had been hiding far more than I ever imagined. There were texts from his business partners, discussing how they had planned to manipulate me into giving up more of my family's assets. They spoke about me like I was nothing more than a pawn, someone they could easily control for their own benefit. One message stood out. "Once Sophie's trust fund is fully in play, we can leverage her name to secure these investments. The rest will be easy." I felt my stomach drop as I read the words. The people I thought were my friends, the man I had married, had been planning my downfall from the start. I had been nothing more than a stepping stone in their scheme for power and wealth. They didn't care about me. They cared about what I could give them. Tears blurred my vision as I clicked through more messages, more plans, more schemes. Darren had been playing me for a fool, and I had walked right into his trap. The rage inside me burned hotter with each new discovery. I didn't know what to do next. My entire world felt like it had shattered in an instant. The life I had envisioned for myself, the love I thought I had, was all a lie. But I couldn't back down. I couldn't let him win. I had to fight for my life, for my future, for everything I had built before Darren had come into the picture. That night, when Darren returned, I was ready. I had spent the day organizing the evidence, putting together everything I had discovered. As he walked through the door, I didn't even look up from the papers on the table. He knew something was wrong as soon as he entered the room. "Sophie," he said, his voice cold. "What's going on? Why are you acting like this?" I looked up, my eyes burning with the fury that had been building inside me for days. "You want to know what's going on, Darren?" I asked, my voice shaking with anger. "I know what you've been doing. I know about the money, the trust fund, the plan to take everything from me. You've been using me from the start." He didn't even flinch. Instead, he took a step toward me, his eyes darkening. "Sophie, this isn't what you think. I'm doing this for us, for our future." "No," I snapped, slamming the papers on the table in front of him. "You've been lying to me this entire time. You don't love me, Darren. You've been using me to get to my money, and I'm done." His face contorted with frustration, but there was something else behind his eyes, something darker, something that made my skin crawl. "You're making a mistake, Sophie," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "No one betrays me and gets away with it. You'll regret this." I stood up, my hands clenched into fists. "I don't regret it. I'm done with your lies, Darren. You've made your move, and now I'm going to make mine." For the first time, I saw something flicker in his eyes, a flash of fear, quickly masked by arrogance. He took a step back, as if weighing his next move. "You're playing a dangerous game, Sophie," he warned, his voice now a low growl. "I can destroy you. You have no idea what you're up against." I didn't flinch. "I've been living in fear of you for too long. Now it's time for you to fear me." He looked at me, his expression hardening, before turning on his heel and storming out of the room. But I could see it in his eyes, the fear, the realization that things were no longer under his control. The battle had begun, and I wasn't going to stop until I had everything back. The moment Darren walked out that night, I felt a strange mixture of relief and anticipation. For the first time, I was free. Free from the grip of his lies, free from the anxiety that had consumed me for months. But I wasn't done, not by a long shot. I had evidence now, emails, financial records, his own words used against him. It was time to take the next step. I spent the following days gathering everything I could find. Proof of his affair, copies of documents detailing the fraudulent investments, and an ironclad case that would ruin him if the world knew the truth. I reached out to a lawyer, someone with experience in dealing with billionaires who thought they were above the law. This was going to be messy, but I was ready. I couldn't let him get away with what he had done, not after everything. The lawyer advised me to be discreet, to prepare for a long battle, but I was determined. Darren had tried to take everything from me, and I would make sure he paid the price for his greed. The courtroom was cold, the air thick with tension. Darren sat on the opposite side, his arrogance practically radiating off him, but there was something in his eyes now, something I hadn't seen before. Fear. He had underestimated me. He thought he could walk all over me, but I was ready to fight. The lawyer made our case clear: fraudulent transactions, hidden assets, emotional manipulation, and betrayal. Each piece of evidence I had gathered was like a hammer, chipping away at Darren's defense. His smug smile faded with every document I presented, every secret exposed. By the end of the day, I could see the cracks in Darren's facade. The public humiliation was palpable. His empire of lies was crumbling. As the judge adjourned the court for the day, I couldn't help but feel a surge of triumph. Darren had lost. Not just the case, but the power he thought he had over me. Days passed, and the media frenzy surrounding Darren's fall from grace reached its peak. His business partners started distancing themselves, his wealth slowly slipping away as the truth came out about his unethical practices. But it wasn't just about money anymore. For me, it was about taking back control. I was done being the victim. I was done being the one who had to fix the mess Darren created. I made sure he knew exactly who had exposed him. I wanted him to feel the weight of the consequences of his actions. He had destroyed my trust, my faith in love, and now he would pay. I was now the one with power, with leverage. Darren's lawyers couldn't stop me, and the media couldn't ignore me. The narrative had shifted, and I was no longer the woman he could manipulate. It was the day the final decision was made. Darren was found guilty of multiple counts of fraud and financial manipulation. His assets were seized, his reputation destroyed. But more than that, he had lost the one thing that mattered most, his grip on me. Sitting in that courtroom, hearing the judge's final verdict, I felt a sense of closure wash over me. The woman who had walked in so naive and vulnerable had now walked out stronger, victorious. I didn't just win the legal battle, I won my life back. I walked out of the courthouse, the sun shining down on me for the first time in months. The weight that had been on my shoulders for so long was gone. I was free. Free from Darren, free from the lies, free from the chains I had allowed to bind me. I had learned so much through this experience. Trust had been broken, but I was rebuilding, stronger, wiser, and more certain of who I was. The love I had once given so freely now belonged to me. It was mine. Months passed and life began to feel normal again, but something had changed. I had changed. I was no longer the woman who was afraid to speak up. I wasn't the one who let someone take control of my life. I had fought back, and I had come out on top. Darren had been arrested for his financial crimes, and though the settlement he offered wasn't enough to make up for the years of emotional manipulation, it was enough to start anew. And I did. I used the money to start a foundation, one that would help other women who had been manipulated, used, and betrayed. I wanted to ensure that no one had to go through what I had. I had finally found peace, and for the first time in my life, I was excited about the future, my future, free from the man who had once stolen my heart for the wrong reasons.